A judge insults Pam Bondi in court. Minutes later, she has him in handcuffs, asterisk, asterisk. You won't believe what just unfolded in this courtroom. Pam Bondi, a seasoned attorney with years of experience fighting some of the toughest legal battles, knew how to handle pressure. She had tackled some of the most high-profile cases in the country. But today felt different as she entered Judge Howard Gates' courtroom. She braced herself. Gates was notorious for his sharp tongue and unpredictable rulings. He wasn't just any judge. He had a reputation, and Pam knew it wasn't going to be an ordinary hearing. The case was already a big one, a government ethics violation tied to a wealthy developer with deep political connections. The defendant had been accused of funneling state funds into his private projects. The evidence against him was substantial, and Pam had prepared thoroughly. What she hadn't anticipated was hostility coming from the bench before Pam even spoke. Judge Gates barely acknowledged her. He flipped through a file slowly, purposefully, letting the courtroom settle into an uncomfortable silence, one that wasn't about procedure, but about power. Finally, he spoke without looking up. Ms. Bondi, I assume you prepared something substantial today. Or should we skip ahead to the part where you waste my time? A few chuckles came from the defendant's legal team in the back. Bondi didn't flinch. She had faced worse, Your Honor. I believe the evidence will speak for itself. This case involves a misuse of taxpayer dollars, and my job is to present the facts accurately, she said, keeping her tone even. Judge Gates leaned back in his chair, feigning disinterest. Taxpayer dollars? Right, because that's never been the foundation of a frivolous case. Bondi's jaw tightened, but she kept her calm. Respectfully, Your Honor, I would hardly call felony corruption charges frivolous. Their eyes locked for a brief moment, his cold and calculating, hers unwavering. But before she could continue, he cut her off again. Mrs. Bondi, spare me the lectures. Just get to the point. I don't have all day for whatever grandstanding you have planned. A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. It was clear something was off. Judges could be tough, but this was personal. Pam took a slow, deliberate breath. She wasn't going to let him control the room. She picked up a folder from the table, flipping it open. Your Honor, I'd like to direct the court's attention to Exhibit A, she began. Judge Gates interrupted again. Do you always insist on drowning people in paperwork, or is this your way of compensating? The shift in the room was immediate. A few reporters exchanged glances. The defense attorney smirked. But Pam didn't budge. She knew men like Judge Gates thrived on intimidation, and the only way to beat them was to stay calm, unshaken. She paused, letting the silence speak for itself before saying, Your Honor, if you prefer to continue making this personal, I'm happy to request a recess while we address any professional concerns you may have. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't disrespectful. But it was a warning. She wasn't going to be rattled. Judge Gates' lips curled. Was it amusement or annoyance? It was hard to tell, but one thing was certain. He wasn't done. Not yet. I don't have concerns, Miss Bondi. I just know a weak case when I see one. This time, the response wasn't just murmurs. It was gasps. Something had shifted. Pam could feel the tension in the room. This wasn't just a difficult judge. This was a judge with something to hide. And she wasn't about to let him get away with it. Pam adjusted her blazer, straightened a few papers, and met Gates' gaze head-on. I suppose we should let the evidence do the talking. As she spoke, she saw it in his eyes, not just arrogance, but something deeper. He had a stake in the outcome of this case. That's when it hit her. Judge Gates wasn't just being combative for sport. He was trying to undermine her, playing a calculated game. But why? She moved forward with the evidence, not backing down. These financial records show a clear discrepancy in the funding allocations. The defendant's company received nearly triple the amount approved in the original budget, and none of it was accounted for in the state records. Judge Gates cut in again. I hate to interrupt your presentation, Ms. Bondi, but I think we've seen enough numbers for one day. Pam's gaze didn't falter. Your Honor, with all due respect, these numbers are the foundation of the case. Gates scoffed. And yet I fail to see anything that justifies wasting the court's time. That was it. The judge had made his intentions clear. He was trying to bury this case before it even started. Pam didn't flinch. Instead, she kept going. I'd like to submit a motion to deny. Before she could even finish her sentence, Gates cut her off. I haven't even heard your motion, and I can already tell you it's going nowhere. The courtroom had reached a boiling point. The defense was quiet now. The prosecution team exchanged nervous glances. Even the stenographer seemed on edge. Pam steadied her breath and turned to the next piece of evidence. This document, obtained through subpoena, shows... This time, Gates was leaning forward. No more smugness. No more leaning back in his chair. He was on edge. "Approach the bench," he said in a low voice, not request but demand. Pam hesitated before walking toward him. The courtroom went quiet. Gates lowered his voice, just enough for her to hear. "I'd strongly suggest you reconsider the direction you're taking here, Miss Bondi," he murmured. Pam tilted her head, the weight of the moment settling in. "Excuse me?" "Some fights aren't worth having," he said, his voice a barely audible whisper. Pam leaned in just a fraction closer. "I don't scare easily, Judge Gates." A muscle in his jaw twitched. She turned and walked back to her table. The warning was clear. Now, Pam was more certain than ever. Judge Gates wasn't just being combative. He was hiding something. And she was going to find out what it was. As she returned to the table, her mind raced. This wasn't just about legal maneuvering anymore. This was about power and who controlled it without missing a beat. Pam reached for another document. "Your Honor, this is a contract signed between the defendant and the city's planning board." She placed a second document on the projector screen, outlining discrepancies in the project's budget. Then, she placed a third document, a ledger showing the actual funds transferred, on the table. "Notice the signature?" she said, her voice steady. "It's yours, Judge Gates." The room fell into stunned silence. The defense attorney stiffened. The developer's smug expressions vanished. Judge Gates didn't react. For the first time that day, he was stone silent. Pam let the moment hang in the air. "Would you like to explain why your signature appears on an unauthorized financial transaction involving the defendant?" Gates remained frozen. Pam was holding all the cards now, but she wasn't done yet. "I'd like to submit this as evidence." Gates muttered that the document was inadmissible, claiming it was improperly obtained, but Pam had anticipated this. "This document was subpoenaed by my office, Your Honor." Gates scoffed. "Then it was mishandled." Pam didn't back down. She had him now. Before Gates could speak again, she pulled out a small recorder and pressed play. A low, gruff voice filled the room, unmistakable. "Take care of it. I don't care how. Just make sure she doesn't get her. Hands on those ledgers." The courtroom went dead silent. Everyone heard it. The unmistakable voice of Judge Gates. He didn't move, didn't speak. He couldn't. Pam glanced at him, but he didn't respond. The room was in shock. Then she placed another document on the table, a wiretap transcript. It corroborated the recording. "Officer Reynolds," she said calmly, "would you please read the highlighted section aloud?" The bailiff hesitated, but did as instructed. "We'll take care of her. Bondi doesn't have anything solid yet, but if she does, I'll make sure it never sees the inside of a courtroom." The tension in the room was palpable. Pam looked directly at Gates. "I'd like to submit this as evidence." Judge Gates was cornered. He shifted, clearly rattled. He had nowhere to turn. He couldn't escape as the officers moved toward him. Pam's voice cut through the room. "You are under arrest." The gasps were immediate. Cameras flashed. Even the powerful developer, Charles Lawson, was stunned. Judge Gates didn't speak. He didn't move. He just sat there, frozen, eyes fixed on a point, trying to make it all go away. But it was too late. Reality had caught up with him. The officers snapped the handcuffs on him, and Pam didn't flinch. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. Gates muttered something, but his fight had drained away. He was done. The courtroom went silent. And Pam Bondi, poised and calm, was the one who had brought down the man who thought he was untouchable. As Gates was let out of the courtroom, the power balance had shifted. Pam Bondi wasn't finished yet. "Mr. Lawson," she said, turning toward the developer, "would you like to continue, or would you prefer to discuss a plea?" This wasn't just about a case anymore. It was about something much bigger. Pam Bondi had just sent a message. No one is above the law.